What's up, guys? Welcome back to... Let me turn off the fan again. Hi, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dogeback Poker Vlogs. Today is day 2 of the Vegas trip. I actually have no idea where I want to play poker today yet. I just knocked out last night because I was tired. But what I do know is that I'm still tired, and I'm hungry, and the Modern Vegan is like right outside. Like it's right there. It might as well be in the same apartment complex. So let's go eat first, and I'll decide where to play afterwards. And just let go. This is where the Airbnb is, and this is where the restaurant is. Alright guys, time to head back to the car, and probably gonna play at Bellagio today. I'll think about it on the way to the trip. Get the family discount here, guys. You know what I mean, yeah. You know what I mean, yeah. Do you know what I mean, yeah? You know what I mean, yeah. You know what I mean, yeah. You know what I mean, yeah. Do you know what I mean, yeah? All right, guys. I actually was looking on Poker Atlas, and I saw a poker room that's in Resorts Casino, I think. I believe that is a pretty new building. I saw it being built last time I was in Vegas, and yeah, as far as I remember, it's like one of the newer properties. Yeah, I don't know why their logo looks like this. I could not tell what the word said, but it's called Resorts World Las Vegas, so I'm gonna be playing there instead, and that means, yeah, I'm gonna be leaving this trip after just having gotten here. I was originally gonna play at Bellagio, but I had already been there, so I thought it would be a good day to play at a new place, especially one that has a higher max buy-in. So, wish me luck. All right, guys, we're going to be playing some 3-5 at Resorts World. Unfortunately, there wasn't a 3-5 game going, so I just got myself on the list, and I decided to play some 1-3 while waiting. There weren't really any interesting hands that happened in the 1-3 game. We only played for about 45 minutes, and the only hands I wrote down were one where I had aces in a 4-bet pot and took it down with a shove on the flop, and then another one where I had kings, and it was actually my opponent pre-flop who 4-bet shoved for 100, and I called, and we held against ace-king. So I ended up winning 167 during the 1-3 session, so already a good start to the vlog. Eventually, the floor man came over and asked everyone who was on the 3-5 list if we were okay with playing 5-handed. We all agreed, and after we started getting set up, another player came and was interested in playing, so we start off the 3-5 session 6-handed. Alright guys, on to the first notable hand of the session. I have ace queen of spades on the button. There's one limp, and I raise it up to 25, and only the limper calls. So heads up to a flop, which is pretty good. It's 4, 6, 7, 3 spades. We flop the absolute nuts. Well, not really the absolute nuts, but I don't expect him to have 8-5 suited here for a straight flush. So he checks it over to me, and I just check it back. Don't want to scare my opponent off too soon. The turn comes pretty much the worst possible card in the deck. It's the king of spades. 4 spades on the board, and he cannot have the king of spades. It's going to be really, really hard to get value here. The low jack checks it over to me, and I decide to try to just squeeze out a tiny, tiny bit of value and make it look like I'm just trying to steal the pot potentially. But in situations like this, it's always going to look strong when you bet. I put out a tiny, tiny bet of $15. Potentially can get a call from like a king or something. And he does actually make the call, so we get a tiny, tiny bit of value. The river is the 7 of diamonds. Pairs the board, but I don't imagine that's too relevant in this specific hand. I don't expect my opponent to have some kind of flop set or something, but you never know. My opponent checks it over to me, and I don't really think I can get value regardless, so I guess in the moment I just wanted to get more value if for some reason he does make the call. So I bet 75, close to a pot size bet, and obviously he just folds here. Unfortunately, we're just gonna not get too much value with our nut flush. Why does it feel like I lost this hand? Alright guys, in this next hand, I get dealt pocket 9s in the big blind. The low jack opens to $15 and gets 4 callers. Action's now on me, and this is a perfect spot to squeeze. Pocket 9s are a hand that I want to get value with pre-flop, and we don't want to go to a flop super multi-way since
Nines are a hand that aren't going to play super well in those spots when overcards come out. A raise could also potentially allow us to win the hand right here without seeing a flop. No one showed any real strength, and there's a lot of dead money in the pot, so this is just one of those spots where a squeeze is going to be really profitable. So a 3-bet is going to be the best option here, so I decide to call. We're going to a flop 6 ways, which comes 8 king king rainbow. Pretty good flop for my hand overall, but we are out of position and there is a decent chance someone could have a better hand, so I decide to just check once the small blind checks it over to me. So we're still going 6 ways to a turn card, which is the deuce of spades, bringing a backdoor flush draw. Pretty good card for my hand, and since everyone checked on the flop, it is less likely someone has a king, though there is a chance someone's trapping. So this time when the small blind checks, I decide I'm going to bet here. We want to thin out the field and also get value from maybe something like 8s or a backdoor flush draw. So I decide to make it $35 and only the player in the hijack makes the call. We're going heads up to a river card, which is not the best one. It's the 6 of spades, so the backdoor flush does get there and that's going to make up a decent portion of his range. After thinking for a while, I decide to just check. It's very unlikely I get 2 streets of value from something like an 8 or potentially worse, so I'm just hoping to get to showdown for free. Nope, the hijack decides to bet and he makes it pretty big as well. He bets 125 and after thinking for a bit, I just let my hand go. Pocket 9s is probably one of the worst hands I'm going to have in this spot. Maybe I bet an 8 on the turn sometimes, but I don't think that's going to be super often, and I'm also going to have a king here sometimes, and I could have some flushes here as well. So just going to let this one go and live to see a better spot. In this next hand, I'm in the cutoff with 9-8 suited. There's a limp and an open to $25, and with the suited connector, just going to make the call here. The button and the limper come along as well, so we're going to a flop 4 ways. It's very good for us. It's 3-10-7 with 2 spades. We've got an open-ended straight draw as well as a backdoor flush draw. The low jack and the hijack check, and since the hijack was the pre-flop aggressor, I decide I'm going to take the betting lead here and I make it $65. We could potentially win the hand right now, and we're building a pot for if we do hit our draw. The button decides to call, and so does the hijack, so we're going 3 ways to a turn card. It's the 10 of hearts, which isn't the best card. It makes it less likely I have a 10, which is one of the hands I'm trying to rep. The player on the button could very well have a 10 as well. I doubt the hijack does, since I imagine he would have been betting that on the flop. Once the hijack checks it over to me, I decide I'm going to slow down here and just check, and the button checks back. So we are going to a river card. It's the ace of diamonds. Once again, a pretty bad card. This is going to be much better for the hijack's range, since he's going to have a lot of aces being the pre-flop aggressor. And on top of that, we simply do not hit our draw. So I'm sitting here with 9 high like a boss. The hijack decides to bet 125 and obviously going to make the folds here. The button folds as well, so we are not going to see what the hijack had. In this next hand, I get dealt a suited connector once again. It's 6-5 suited instead of 9-8, but this is a hand I like to get in the mix with sometimes, just so I could play both sides of the board and keep my opponents on their toes. So I raise it up to $20 from the hijack, and only the player in the big blind calls. Heads up to a flop, which is once again really good for my hand. It's 4-7 with 2 clubs, so now we have not only an open-ended straight draw, but also a flush draw. The big blind checks, and I'm obviously going to put out a bet here, so I make it $25, and he makes the call. The turn is the 4 of spades, so seems like a similar spot to the last hand, but it really isn't, since a 4 is a much lower card than a 10, and it's probably not super relevant. Unlike the last hand as well, we're also heads up instead of 3 ways, so I feel much more comfortable continuing betting here. We only have 6 high here. I'm going to keep up the pressure. I decide to bet 75 this time. I like to size up on the turn after someone calls my flop bet, and I'd also be playing like this if I had something like an overpair. My bet ends up getting through as my opponent folds, so we're going to take this one down with 6 high. Alright guys, this next hand is going to be a lot more exciting, for better or for worse. I get dealt ace-king in the small blind. The cutoff opens to $15, and once the button folds, I put out a 3-bet to $50, and the cutoff just flats. So we're going to be going to a flop heads up, which is 5-6-6 with 2 hearts. We got a heart in our hand for what it's worth, and in general, there's just going to be a better flop for the 3-betters range, so I decide to bet small here, and I make it $35. We're going to get value from some ace highs, maybe some king highs that want to float. And more importantly, I just want to get some cheap folds here when I don't have a made hand. The cutoff decides to raise here and makes it $95, and I'm immediately suspicious here since I don't expect this board to really connect with either of our ranges. It more so just seems like he has a hand like 10s or higher and wants to put pressure on something like ace king, which is my exact holding. So I decide I'm going to get a little bit out of line here, and I 3-bet to $350. I believe the bigger reason was because I just didn't believe him and I wanted to just get him to fold. But also, I think a 3-bet here is going to put a lot of pressure on a hand like 10s or something like that, and maybe even put like jacks in a tough spot, though I think those hands are probably just going to call off anyways. Not really sure how I feel about my play, especially because I think in live poker, it's probably just better to play a very standard value-based game, and you don't really need to get out of line to be a profitable player. But sometimes I like to pull aggressive triggers in spots where I think it could be good. But unfortunately, my opponent does not fold and doesn't even just call. He puts me all in for $800, and this is a really annoying spot because I felt like I was priced in, and I kind of just cry inside and make the call. Maybe if I 3-bet smaller, I could have gotten away. I think I needed like 25% or something, and since I put him on basically just an overpair that wanted to get it in on this board, I figured that I just call and that I was priced in. But I'm going to be completely honest, guys. I am absolutely horrible at like calculating the math and stuff in the moment, so I just kind of make the decision that I feel like is best at the time. So I ended up making the call. We are looking for some help here. The turn is the 10 of diamonds, and the river is the jack of spades.
Wow, nice hand.
So we are sitting here with ace high. Our hand is certainly no good, and my opponent turns over pocket fives. I did not expect him to have that calling a 3-bet, but it's not super surprising. I was just really hoping he had something like 10s or jacks or queens, or maybe a really aggressively played flush draw. But unfortunately, we were drawing dead, and this was the absolute worst outcome. We lost the maximum, guys, all because I decided to be super aggro. I decided to rebuy here for $1,200 after a session that was mostly break even. I'm now down piles of money. Hopefully I can play better for the rest of the session and not spew off my stack. This next hand is a pretty interesting one, not so much from my perspective or because how I played, but more so because of my opponent. We've got 9-8 suited once again in the cutoff. I open to $20 once action folds to me, and the big blind 3-bets to 70. His name is Thomas, and I actually saw him at the last session when I was at South Point, but he was setting up a mixed game, so I talked to him a bit while I was at Resorts World before we played, and he seemed like a solid player. I make the call here, so we are going heads up to a flop, which is 5-5-6 rainbow. My opponent checks, happy to take a free card, so I check it back. The turn is the 10 of diamonds, should be better for my range than his. We also pick up a gut shot, which gives us a little more equity, and he checks it over to me once again. So I decide I'm going to take a stab and try to rep the 10. I make it $65, and unfortunately, Thomas makes the call. So we're looking for some help on the river. Nope, it's the deuce of hearts, as blank as it gets, and Thomas ends up leading for $225. We've got an easy fold here. I let my hand go, and he's nice enough to show that he had pocket aces. I really liked how he played the hand. He checked on the flop, and I think that's really good because I'm not really going to connect with that flop too much, so it's probably going to get more value letting me see a free card. I also like that he checked the turn as well when the 10 rolls off because I'm going to be repping that card a lot like I did in this hand, or I'm going to connect with it and bet anyways, which is going to be great for him since he's going to get value without having to bet, and his hand is going to be more disguised. And then on the river, when a deuce comes off, he puts out a fairly large bet, which I like because a 10 is almost always going to have to call there, and unfortunately for him, I had 9 high like a boss. So there was no more value to be had, but very well played, Thomas. Alright guys, we got a premium in this next hand. I get dealt pocket jacks on the button, no less. Action folds all the way to me, and I open it up to $20. I get called by the big blind. We're going to a flop heads up. It comes 3-9-10 with 2 hearts. My opponent checks to me, and normally on boards like these, I'm going to be checking since it's not really going to favor my range, but I'm going to keep it simple here and just bet. We don't want to see an overcard come off, and there are plenty of hands we can get value from, so I make it $30 on the larger side since this is such a coordinated board, and my opponent makes the call. The turn is a 10 of clubs. Not horrible, not great. My opponent could very well have a 10, but there are still worse hands we can get value from, especially since this puts out a backdoor flush draw. My opponent checks it to me, and I make it $65. He calls once again, so we are going to a river card, and it's a very good one, guys. It's the jack of spades. We've got top boat here, and even better is that this could have potentially completed a straight draw that my opponent could have. He checks it over to me though, so just gonna go for some value here, and doesn't seem like he's super strong. So I decide to bet pretty big here. I make it 175 because I figure that if he has a hand that he's just gonna fold, he's probably just gonna fold to any decent sized bet regardless. So might as well try to get more value from the hands that he's gonna be calling us with. I'm also triple barreling here, so any bet size is gonna look pretty strong, and this could make it look like I have maybe a missed flush draw. He ends up calling, and I show my boat, and he ends up mucking. Very nice to win a decent sized pot after that one hand where I spewed off my stack. We are slowly climbing back up to even. Moving on to the next hand, we've got pocket sevens in the big blind. The under the gun player limps, and the player on the button raises it up to $15. I make the call, and so does the limper. So we're going 3 ways to a flop, which is 6, 5, 7 with 2 spades. We've got top set on a really wet board. I check, and so does the under the gun player. The button puts out a C bet of $20. We're obviously going to put out a raise here. I made it 65 at the time, but I think I should have raised to a little bit bigger since the board is very coordinated. Anyways, only the button calls, so we're going heads up to a turn card. It's the deuce of spades. Not the greatest card since it completes the flush draw, but we're still going to go for value here. Can't always be scared of flushes. So I bet 75 here. Probably should have made it much bigger since the board is still very, very wet. I'm not sure why I made it this small, to be honest. I was probably just scared of bloating the pot when there's a potential flush. But anyways, my opponent calls once again. We're going to a river card, and it comes the worst possible card in the deck. It's the 4 of spades. There are now 4 spades on the board, and any 8 gets there and makes a straight. So even if we do somehow get the showdown, our hand could very well not be the best. And even worse is that once I check, my opponent bets $100. We have a very easy fold here. And yeah, just not going to win it here with top set. Very unfortunate. In this next hand, I get dealt pocket kings in the cutoff. The under the gun player opens to 20. I'm going to put out a 3-bet here, and I make it 65. And only the player in the small blind calls. We're headed to a flop heads up, which is 4-8-6 rainbow. The small blind decides to lead out and makes it 120. I decide to just call here. I think you could make a case for raising for value. Sometimes players will do this when they just have like a hand they don't want to get outdrawn on, like maybe jacks or tens. But I decide I'm just going to let my opponent keep barreling since it seems like they want to take the betting lead. So I just make the call. We are going to a turn card. It's very good. It's the deuce of spades, completing the rainbow. We should still have the best hand here. And even better is that my opponent shoves for 419, which is a little bit over the pot. The only thing that can make this situation better is if they had 420 instead of 419. But we're going to make the call. No complaints here. The river card's the 8 of spades. Not the best card since they could be doing this with just like a scared top pair. Sometimes players will do this. But luckily my opponent turns over pocket queens. So nothing too surprising there. And we're going to get maximum value here, which is very nice because we are still stuck piles. Alright guys, very last hand for this session. I've got ace-jack suited. Once again, we are in the cutoff. I open it up to $20 after action folds to me, and the button and the small blind call. The big blind wants to play for more. He 3-bets to 125, and this player was pretty solid. Could be 3-bet bluffing a lot, and we've got a decent hand. I could 4-bet here, but I decide I'm just going to make the call. Flop comes down 4-10-3 with 2 diamonds. My opponent puts out a C-bet of around 200 something. I'm tempted to float with my 2 overs, but besides that, we don't have too much equity, and we're not playing super deep, so I don't want to have to fold to an all-in on the turn after calling 200 on the flop, so I just stay disciplined and fold, and my opponent's nice enough to show king-king for the vlog, but I didn't catch it on camera since I turned it off right after folding. I don't know if I caught it, but he had kings. Nice hand. So that's the very last hand. As is often the case when someone notices me vlogging, they get pretty curious about it, so we had another conversation about vlogging, just like we did in the last session, and yeah, it's always fun. It makes the table more friendly and more fun to play at, but unfortunately, that's going to be the very last hand, and we did not make it back to even, guys. I played for about 5 hours. I was in for a total of $2,400 and cashed out for $1,420, which makes for a loss of $980. After accounting for the decent win at the 1-3 game, we ended up being down $813 on the day. How's it going? Good, thank you. Here. Gotcha.
400. 14, 25. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000. 1, 2, 3, 1,400, 20, and 5.
Alright, thank you.
You have a good night.
You too. Thank you. Alright guys, that's it for today's vlog. I was really impressed by how nice Resorts World was. The inside of the casino is just so nice. It has a very like modern, very clean kind of aesthetic. Really nice poker room as well. I think the skill level for this 2-5 game was definitely up there. Once the floor man came to the 1-3 table asking if we'd be okay with playing 5-handed, I was kind of iffy about it, but I thought it'd be good for me to just play fewer people and see how I adjust. And it turned out to be 6-handed, and then we got a full table eventually. So there was one player at the table who was just completely crushing me. Maybe he had a hand each time, but it seemed like he knew exactly when to 3-bet me or 4-bet me off my hand. And like every spot, whether it was like pre-flop or post-flop with him, he just completely destroyed me. So yeah, the skill level was definitely higher in this game than I'm used to, but it was fun playing against people who were stronger players than I was, and I definitely could have played some hands better, including the one where I punted off $800 with my ace-king, and then a few other hands I could have just taken some different lines that would have been better, but it's okay. It's part of the process of getting better, and tomorrow I think I'm going to go on with the theme, or not really theme, but just the thing of going to new poker rooms, since I really like doing that. I especially also want to get the $1 chips for my poker chip collection. So it'll be a lot of fun going to new places. Properties like Bellagio and Aria and all those big places, those are always going to be there. I can play at those anytime I want. So I think this trip should be a good opportunity to just go to those more like obscure poker rooms, just so I could see what they're like, and then probably never go back to them again. But I was really impressed with South Point, really impressed with Resorts World, so I'm pretty sure other places are going to be surprisingly nice too. So that'll be it for today's vlog. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night or morning or afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you guys in the next vlog. Peace. Alright guys, we're going to be playing some 3-5 at Resorts World. Unfortunately... Oh my goodness, that burp was actually incredible.